Widely considered as the greatest heavyweight of all time, Fedor Emelianenko built a legacy of unmatched dominance in MMA without ever stepping inside the octagon of UFC.
That's, to me, the biggest regret of all of MMA.
It is a shame. Fedor could have been over in the UFC and we could have got the best fighting the best.
I would have given anything to see that.
The crazy Russians know this. You know the real story and what the truth is.
Yet, who was the legendary Fedor and how did his opponents ever defeat him? Hello and welcome to our channel. Today we are counting down the 7 times when the last emperor was conquered by his adversaries. Let's get into it. Not the biggest, nor the strongest. To the unacquainted eyes, Fedor would just be an afterthought. An unremarkable man in an era of bodybuilders and PED monsters. A David in a world of Goliaths. Raised in a small Soviet town, Fedor trained in judo and sambo from the age of 11, eventually earning the Russian Master of Sports honorary title in both, and even made the Russian national team. However, due to his financial conditions, Fedor eventually left to compete professionally in mixed martial arts. Number 7. Tsuyoshi Kosaka. Starting his MMA career at events held by Fighting Network rings, Fedor suffered his first loss early on, but it came in a very controversial fashion. With only 3 professional wins under his belt, Fedor earned Rings King of Kings 2000 tournament in Osaka, Japan. After defeating Ricardo Arona in the opening round via unanimous decision, Fedor faced Tsuyoshi Kosaka later that evening. However, just 17 seconds into the fight, Kosaka threw a punch that missed, but his elbow accidentally connected with Fedor's forehead, reopening a gnarly cut sustained in Fedor's previous bout. The ref called for a timeout and the fight was ruled a TKO loss for Fedor due to the doctor's stoppage. Yet, it was controversial because Kosaka's finishing blow was illegal, since elbow strikes were banned at this event, and Fedor later avenged this loss by defeating Kosaka in a separate bout. Nonetheless, this was only the start of Fedor's tale, an indomitable heavyweight assassin who became the most fearsome force on the planet. A dead-eyed killer who excelled in all attributes of mixed martial arts and always fought with an eerie, uncanny calm. After reigning as the last Rings heavyweight and openweight champion until the promotion went defunct in 2002, Fedor signed with Pride Fighting Championships. Submitting the likes of former UFC heavyweight champions and future Hall of Famers Mark Coleman and Kevin Randleman, Fedor went nearly a decade without another loss. A 27-fight win streak where he was consistently ranked as the #1 heavyweight in the world. Not just that, Sports Illustrated recognized Fedor as the best fighter of the decade. Defeating Minotauro Nogueira for the title in just his 3rd fight under the Pride banner, Fedor reigned as its last heavyweight champion. He would successfully defend the title on 3 occasions, defeating Big Nog in a rematch and another legend in Mirko Cro Cop via unanimous decisions. The last emperor of Pride, until it was bought out by Zuffa, the parent company of UFC in 2007. That was also when Dana White first showed interest in signing Fedor, intending to bring him to UFC for a fight with then heavyweight champion Randy Couture, but that didn't happen because Fedor committed to a deal with M1 Global, the Russian-based promotion of which he was also a minority owner of. Fedor ended up taking his first fight in the USA for the newly formed promotion Affliction, submitting a former 2-time UFC heavyweight champion, Tim Sylvia. At their next event, Fedor knocked out another former UFC heavyweight champion, Andrei Arlovsky. Though he was signed for another Affliction fight against the youngest ever UFC heavyweight champion, Josh Barnett, it fell through after Barnett tested positive for banned substances like anabolic steroids. The event was cancelled and Affliction soon went out of business. After this, Dana repeatedly tried to sign the last emperor to an exclusive UFC contract, even going as far as to say, "Fedor has become my obsession. I want him in the UFC worse than the fans wanted." Had it become a reality, Fedor would have received an immediate title shot against then heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar. However, negotiations fell apart since Fedor's management team demanded that UFC co-promote the events in association with M1 Global, and that was unacceptable for Dana White. To this day, Fedor remains etched in history as the most prominent fight who never competed inside the octagon. But where UFC failed, Strikeforce capitalized and agreed to the terms. So, the last Emperor fought then undefeated Brett Rogers for an event broadcasted live on CBS, earning the win via second-round technical knockout. Afterwards, Fedor signed a 3-fight deal with Showtime TV network, fighting under the Strikeforce banner, but that spelled the start of a 3-fight losing streak for the last Emperor. Number 6. Fabricio Werdum. First, it was Fabricio Werdum, a 4-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion and future UFC heavyweight champion. After knocking Werdum down early with devastating strikes, Fedor closed in and delivered vicious Russian ground and pound, but he severely underestimated his opponent. Fedor thought he could handle Werdum like he did Minotauro, but Werdum's BJJ was light years ahead of Big Knob. He caught Fedor in an armbar from his guard, and although the Samba Master was able to defend against that, Werdum cinched in a deep triangle choke and forced the Russian to tap, handing the last Emperor his first loss in almost a decade. Number 5. Antonio Silva. Then, it was announced that Fedor would be entering the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix, facing Antonio Silva in the quarterfinals. After a highly competitive first round, Bigfoot used his size and weight advantage to get an early second-round takedown on Fedor. Turning it into a mount, Silva unleashed a brutal ground and pound that ultimately caused Fedor's right eye to swell shut. Though Bigfoot tried to finish off the last Emperor, Fedor showed great endurance and managed to survive until the end of the round. However, ringside doctors stopped the fight because Fedor couldn't see, and Silva was awarded the technical knockout. Number 4. Dan Henderson. For his next fight, Fedor stood against a fighter with a similar background, the last Pride middleweight and welterweight champion, and then Strikeforce light heavyweight champion Dan Henderson. This was an absolute slugfest. After significant strikes were exchanged between both fighters, Fedor knocked down Hendo with a combination and went for a ground and pound finish. However, Hendo escaped and rocked the last Emperor with a powerful uppercut from underneath that knocked him unconscious. With Fedor falling face first onto the mat, Hendo went for sledgehammers until referee Herb Dean called for the stoppage at 4 minutes and 12 seconds of the first round. That was the first clean TKO loss of Fedor's career. Losing 3 times in a row was enough for Fedor to reevaluate, so he returned to Russia. After a few more fights, including one where he defeated Jeff Monson via unanimous decision, Fedor decided to retire from competition in 2012 because of injuries and aging. However, after a 3-year hiatus, the last Emperor made his comeback in 2015 for a final run under the bright lights and during the Bellator 165. It was announced that he had signed a multi-fight deal with Bellator MMA. Number 3. Matt Mitrione. Fedor's return to the States was against Matt Mitrione as the co-main event of Bellator NYC. Just as they were feeling each other out, both fighters knocked each other out in a double KO, but the young meathead recovered faster than Fedor and was able to pound out the first round stoppage. Number 2. Ryan Bader. After the loss to Mitrione, Fedor then entered the Bellator Heavyweight World Grand Prix for the vacant championship. The Russian bear mauled through a former UFC heavyweight champion in Frank Mir to clear the quarterfinals and killed Sonnen in the semis, defeating both via first-round knockouts. However, for the finals at Bellator 214, Fedor faced the then Bellator light heavyweight world champion Ryan Bader. On fight night, Darth Bader aggressively pushed Fedor and knocked out the last Emperor with a single lead left hook just 35 seconds into the fight. That was it, as Bader was crowned the first man in Bellator history to simultaneously hold titles in 2 divisions. However, this would not be the end of the last Emperor, because Fedor couldn't just ride off into the sunset after the most humiliating loss of his career. A rematch was necessary. Number 1. Ryan Bader. So after accumulating victories over former UFC light heavyweight champion Rampant Jackson and Timothy Johnson, both via first-round knockouts, Fedor challenged Bader to a title rematch at Bellator 290 in what would be the legend's last stand in MMA, his final opportunity to go out as the heavyweight world champion. In February of 2023, the 46-year-old made his final ring walk to the site of his last encounter with Bader, the Bellator cage at the Kia Forum in Inglewood, California. Time has never been kind to anyone, On fight night, Fedor was a shadow of his former self, and Bader was the man who had his number. The last emperor just couldn't defend himself against Bader's aggressive strikes and was so knocked down. With Fedor unable to lock the armbar that he used to win so many of his fights with, Darth Bader punched out the technical knockout and the ground and pound halfway through the first round, becoming the only man to conquer the last emperor not just once, but twice. However, as soon as referee Herb Dean called for stoppage, Bader went directly to Fedor, paying respect to the legend. In his prime, the last emperor was unstoppable, and it was only in his waning years when his opponent ever had a chance against him. With a record of 40 wins, 7 losses, and 1 no contest out of his 48 MMA fights, it was truly the end of an era, as Fedor Emelianenko laid down the gloves to end his legendary career. Other combat sports fighters like Chuck Norris, Mike Tyson, even Khabib Nurmagomedov have called Fedor the greatest mixed martial artist of all time. Truly, the last emperor of the golden era of mixed martial arts, as his legacy and impact on the sport has been compared to that of Muhammad Ali in boxing. But what are your thoughts on Fedor? Where do you rank the last emperor on your list of GOATs? Sound off in the comments below.